Tim, I'm going to start with you. What is the president doing here? Why is he doing it now? And does he care about the midterms?
Let's see. Definitely he cares about the midterms. But before we get to the midterms, I think Trump always has goals, but he doesn't always have a strategy. And it's important to separate the two. And generally, the goals revolve around wanting to appear he can act unilaterally at will whenever he feels the need. And there's a large amount of performance art associated with it. And in small venues, that's okay. If it's a reality TV show or it's a real estate deal, it has less impact on the world. Obviously, it's become more consequential now that he's president. And I think he sees Iran as a flex. And I think he primarily went into it as a flex, and that's problematic. Times is on the administration's side to an extent right now. It's a short-term war. Trump keeps referring...
Hopefully, possibly.
Well, that's the issue, right? Yeah. Because he keeps referring to oil prices will come back down. And we have enough missiles to see this through. But all that is predicated on the idea that it is a short, quick strike. And he comes out of it showing that when he feels that his allies, in this case Israel, or the White House's own interests are threatened, he will take action quickly and unilaterally and on very short notice. That's going to get much harder to defend and to answer to as time goes on, because if oil prices stay elevated, businesses are affected by that and consumers are affected by that. If missile supplies dwindle, it limits our actions in Ukraine or against China, and so all this stuff is going to start to weigh more heavily.
Abby, you looked like you wanted to add to that.
Absolutely. When he acts unilaterally, this means that no one else shares the blame. So if you go back to the Iraq War, and the Bush administration had Congress vote on this, so Senator Hillary Clinton, Senator John Kerry owned some of the blame of the political fallout of this. And as someone who's obsessed about the midterms, I don't think he has that much time. Republicans are already freaking out on the Hill based on what happened in Texas this week, where more Democrats turned out. And so this gets more complicated and tenuous for him based on the price of oil and if there are more American casualties.
He used the word excursion, Tim. We've heard that a couple of times now over the course of these last 8 or 9 days, and I'm curious how you see that reverberating around the halls of Congress, indeed across the country, as a lot of these lawmakers are up for re-election. When does an excursion become something more intractable?
Yeah, it's not a good word. You know, it is not a round on the golf course. Yeah. That's an excursion. This is a military attack with enormous consequences, and I think he takes it more seriously than just an excursion. I don't think he understands the implications of it beyond being an excursion. I think he sees it as something he can go in and get out of. But if the goal actually is to reduce Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, that's still beneath the ground in Isfahan, which we bombed last year. But in order to get it out and make sure that it doesn't remain available to the Iranians, we're going to have to commit ground troops. And the second...
that's not a remote action. You can't have a drone do
No,
that.
You can't have a drone, or even, we used heavy-duty bombers to try to take it out, and maybe completed 90% of that job. Yeah. But according to intelligence reports, it's still available. It's about 970 pounds. It's about 60% enriched. It would have to get to 90 for the Iranians to be able to use it in a nuclear weapon, but it's there. And so once Trump commits troops, all bets are off. This is the thing he criticized about both the Bush and the Obama administrations, that we got committed to long land wars with no end game.
Abby, since you are obsessed with the midterms, I'm going to give you a little room to run here.
Okay.
All right. So before the midterms, there is a Kentucky primary in May. And we've just heard that President Trump is going to be heading to Thomas Massey's home district on Wednesday to stump for his primary challenger. Massey, one of the rare Republican critics of the president, has also been involved with a Democratic colleague, Ro Khanna of California, trying to bring forward those Epstein files. What are Massey's chances, given his position? And then what are some other races before we get to the midterms that we need to keep an eye on?
I think Massey's political standing is to be determined. They've come after him before, and he's come out in flying colors. But the problem is that they're just going to unload the fuselage of advertising against him. But on the issues he is in contention with the president are issues that are popular with the base, most specifically the release of the Epstein files. I think going forward over the spring, there aren't that many Republican primaries because Donald Trump is able to endorse and clear the field. But I think that the Texas primary runoff between John Cornyn and a state attorney general, Ken Paxton, is the World War III of the GOP civil war that's been going on for the last 15 years. And whether John Cornyn can secure that endorsement, which it appears he's about to, and is that enough for him? And so every Trump endorsement is not just about getting the endorsement, but what do you do with it?
Tim, I want to ask you some other news that happened this week. Secretary of Homeland Security, Christina, relieved of that position by the president. Curious, A, how surprised you were by that. This hasn't been a cabinet that's gone under many undulations here over the first year of the president's second term. And second of all, what does it say to you, if anything, about the way directionally that department changes if Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma were to be confirmed?
Well, I think they've learned a lesson in terms of how much patience the American public has with Americans getting shot and killed on the streets of American cities. It's a shame that it had to go to that place before policy changed. I think in Noam's case, it's another reminder of what irks Trump. He stayed with her during a number of other marketing stunts. He stayed behind her during all of the problems associated with the deportations. What tripped the wire here was that she shifted blame for a $270 million ad campaign that appeared to also benefit Corey Lewandowski onto the president.
An aide of hers.
An aide of hers, or more possibly based on her testimony before Congress. We don't know, but she didn't deny any of that either during her testimony, which complicates it further, makes it more embarrassing, potentially, the administration. But the line she crosses, she didn't take a hit for Trump. She essentially threw Trump under the bus in a public forum. And that is basically a death warrant in the Trump administration. You've seen it time and again with people, and I think that's what happened here.
And Abby, quickly before we have to go to break, does taking Mark Wayne Mullen out of his seat compromise Republicans at all, or is that a pretty safe district?
It's a pretty safe district. I find it hard to see that end up being competitive.
All right, but it just doesn't seem like there was a lot of strategy there. They're just confident enough that it's a red district.
He literally got the call, like a minute before?
Yeah, you seem to find out shortly after reporters.
Yeah, and I mean, Oklahoma is as red as it gets, so I will be shocked if that becomes a competitive seat.